Starting off, the party came coming from the tail end of the Waterdeep campaign. Uh, Lane, Ig, Sango, Darvin, Bainyon, and Quilvis all made their way back to the tavern, the Winking Rogue that they had created down there in Waterdeep. Uh, Upon making their way back to their house, they were greeted by a stranger that had actually Cassius, which is Banyon's pet snake, flying snake, kind of around him and then sent him back to Banyan. And this is Kieran, Nick's new character that he is playing for the Xukeajan campaign. Lane had some predisposed ties to the dragon underneath Waterdeep and decided to become a devout follower of the dragon um, and of a religion. So he decided to stay and kind of run the tavern and kind of like hold the ties from the party back into Waterdeep. So Kieran takes hold of the party and lets them know there's a grave danger kind of approaching Xukeajan, and that he needs them to come help. He was sent by Banyon's father figure, Nardal, who he ran into as he was trying to search the seas to find some adventurers. In doing so, the party made their way to the dock ward and set sail, said goodbye to Lane, said goodbye to Kate, the tiefling that they had kind of bonded with, that they made me voice all the time for them, which was awesome. Uh, they found their way on the ship, sailing out from the Sword Coast towards Xukeajan. It was about a couple weeks travel to get out to Xukeajan, as it's not anywhere near the Sword Coast. And they were actually attacked by some serpent flyers that kind of come onto the boat that they were traveling aboard. Uh, Took care of those predisposed serpent dwellers, serpent flyers pretty easily, and made their way to the continent of Xukeajan, passing through Skullsfjord, which is the evil area that has kind of been encroaching on Rango and really all of Xukeajan for the past while now. Landed on the side of Rango, and which is Kieran's home. He is the natural order protector for Rango. And as they made their way into Harlow Hill, which is the capital of Rango, ran into some servants of the Queen of Decay, who is the supposed ruler of Skullsfjord, and kind of the main protagonist, or sorry, antagonist in our campaign here. Um, Kind of disposed of the creatures that were outside of Harlow Hill, and they were left with a give up or face peril kind of tasking. Uh, Kieran wound up introducing a lot of his former colleagues there in Harlow Hill, as he is amongst the order that controls the entire island there, to the rest of the party. And the rest of the party kind of made their way in, kind of met everyone, and they found out that there was some mysterious things going on. All the women in the island, outside of children and outside of the one member that runs the tavern, have all been taken, and they're not really sure why or how or what's happened. Amelia, one of the members of the council, was actually the reason why they started to. Amelia Emerson was the reason that they tried to start looking for this. Is they've noticed some women and stuff have gone missing, and they set the town's keep and try to look into it. But once Amelia Emerson, the political and diplomatic advisor for the continent, or for Rango, was missing, they decided to kind of look into it. So, in going to Amelia's house, meeting with her kids and her husband, they noticed that some type of magical interference had been going on. And so there's a window outside of her bedroom. They followed that into the forest, because that's where the last sightings of any females within the area had been. In going into the forest, they were met by a massive amount of spiders, which they were able to overcome and conquer. After the spiders battle, they ran into a necromancer that was kind of wandering through the forest, and it happened to have been Ryan's character, V. Anavari Roth is his full name, but goes by V. It's a lot easier to say. And he wound up joining the party for a short while as they made their way into what seemed to have been like an old abandoned catacomb or dungeon far into the forest there in Rengo. Unbeknownst to Kieran, what was going on down there, wasn't really sure. They made their way in through the dungeon, um, split up as one went west and one group went east, and found out that it was pretty symmetrical after they made it through the other sides. There was a couple puzzles, a couple things for them to do, and they make their way to the front, which seemingly is a drow cathedral underground. They made their way out the outskirts of it, and just as the second group from the west was joining, Quillis was pulled in through as he was attempting to run in and try to barge into cathedral to figure out what was going on. Was kind of pulled in from a spider-like creature known as Driders. The Drider had carried Quillis down the long cathedral hallway, or pews lying to the left and right of him, and the party followed suit past. Ig decided to take flight and attempt to get a bird's eye view, literally, of what was going on, and noticed there was a female, blonde female, kind of sitting on top of the top of the cathedral, like looking down, not seeming to be any type of distress. And laying on the table in front of them, on a sacrificial table, was Amelia Emerson. Amelia, completely naked, strapped up, potentially being sacrificed at the time being, and you see a couple drow matriarchs in front of her. Sango at the time was kind of shaken, as noticing, as he is a drow, that there's a lot of the makings of drow mischief and things going on around the area. It's kind of taking to the back of the party when he normally is in the front. And everyone tried to get Quillis back, but alas, the woman at the top was actually Loth, who is the queen of the drows. And in doing all of this, the main matriarch that was in charge of kidnapping all the women and using spells to lure the women out and for sacrifices was actually Sango's mom, the matriarch of House Deer. Sango had a little bit of a standoff with his mom, a little bit of a standoff with Loth, and the end, Quilvis was pulled into the seventh realms of the hell, with Sango's mother, the matriarch of House Deer, and Loth. Now, this kind of put a little bit of split in the party because Quilvis has been a part of this group and part of the adventure for such a long time. They made their way out, bringing Amelia out with them, and able to bring back the women that have been taken, make their way into the city, and have a statue erected in Quilvis's name. Once this occurs, they meet with the council and decide that they want to try to build some type of foothold or some type of tavern, something of theirs that they can keep and use in the city of the city of Harlow Hill on the outskirts, and have some type of foothold inside of Xukeajan. The city obliges, and they start construction on a tavern slash castle for the party. The party then decides that they're going to start looking around and trying to find additional things to do. As they make their way out, they went to a tavern, and then Bainion's father figure, Nardal, actually comes up with his band of pirates and meets the group, introduces themselves, and as the pirates were about to leave the island, the group of Valandrian Navy decides to come in and basically try to arrest the pirates, because the pirates are never doing good things and always have something going on. So the pirates kind of fight back. Interestingly enough, Bainion, which Kevin's character, he actually missed that session, so we role played him being invisible, and as soon as he saw his dad and his fellow pirates being kidnapped, and he stowed away on the ship that the Valandrian Navy had and kind of ransacked the entire thing and did a whole Jack Sparrow-esque escape saying, "You'll rue the day that you forget the name Banya," similar to the Jack Sparrow, probably where we took motivation for that. And it made his way down and made it back to the ship of Nardal's, which they were attempting to go and fight. On the way back, the ship actually was taken over by an underwater creature that they're not sure, and some merfolk, some cursed merfolk that were attempting to kill or tame the Valandrian navy. The creature that was underneath the water slowly followed the boat, and as it made its way, was able to stick its massive tongue out and grab hold of Ig and basically swallow Ig whole. And the rest of the party was able to slay the creature and save Ig. Actually, Ig grew in size and was able to have the monster regurgitate him. And then they kind of had a bonding moment between Ig and the rest of the group. After this, the party was met by a merfolk that seemed to have not been part of the group that was attacking the Valandrian navy, or that they were attacking the Valandrian navy because of how bad they are. In meeting them, the merfolk let them know that they have an entire village that is completely built underwater, the city of Ashcot. And Ashcot is completely underwater in between the two islands of Rengo and Ethvald. They go to meet with the king of Ashcot, and sing a song that is the song to get the merfolk to come up and allow them to enter the city. When going down there, they met with the king, and they found out that there is a group of cursed merfolk that are slowly trying to take over, and they're not really sure why or how the merfolk had been cursed. They tasked the party with attempting to dismantle an outpost closer to the Valandrios, and to try to save what's left, or at least the name of the merfolk down in Ashcot. The party then decides to make its way. Actually, they were given a week to make this happen, so they had some downtime that they needed. So they decided to go to Ethvald, unbeknownst to know what's going on there, thinking that because it's a higher civilization, which Ethvald is a more advanced civilization, you can see large buildings that Rango and other continents or islands didn't have. They made their way to Ethvald and were greeted by no one in the entire village. The entire town was completely abandoned. As they were looking around, they ran into three children. The three children were very small. Two of them were very chatty and were able to speak Dwarvish with Jack, as Jack spoke Dwarvish. And one of them just says, "It is what it is," and that's all they would say. Jack was able to translate, and the children told him that there is people that they want him to meet and the rest of the party to meet. Children took the party into the town center of Ethvald, and they were met by the Clockwork King, which they weren't sure if good, bad, what's going on, but there was these massive cyclopses that were patrolling and kind of going through the town to try to figure out there's people there, basically guard. They wound up taking down the cyclopses and attempting to overthrow the Clockwork King, and when they killed the Clockwork King, they went to go and extract or try to get some remnants of what it was, and the Clockwork King's body actually blew up, seemingly meaning that it was a makeshift version of the Clockwork King. Once they destroyed the Cyclopses, the rest of the townspeople that were kind of on the outskirts and kind of not safe to come back into the town, they decided to come back in because it was clear of Cyclopses and they felt that they could defend themselves. They were introduced to Moan, who is the head of the council for Ethvald. Not king, but after the history lesson that we'll go into in a different time, the islands decided to move to, besides Valandrios, tried to move to a council type of government system instead of a king that runs the entire civilization. They made their way to talk to Moan and found out that Moan wanted them to do some research and kind of figure out what was going on, wanted their help to overthrow the Clockwork King. Moan introduced them to the Clockwork King's house, and as the party went into the house, they were able to set off a couple booby traps. Some other things happen that are very risque and part of what ever intro we have to the campaign. um, but yeah, so they did that and found out there was an underground tunnel kind of running through the Clockwork King's house and going into, and they didn't really explore at the time. They made their way upstairs to try to find um, something that they could use to try to help find the Clockwork King for the city, and made their way to a room which had a couch kind of behind it, or a bookshelf and a couch. And behind the bookshelf was the three children that had betrayed them and led them to the Clockwork King. Sango and Sango and Dantine decided to take it upon themselves to kill the children, as there was no hope for them, and that they betrayed the party and betrayed all of Ethvald in doing so. The party kind of didn't like that and decided to attempt to kill each other. And Ig and Dantine and Kieran and Sango and Jack all decided to wage war on each other. They were able to kill one of the kids, and Kieran thought it was a great idea to turn into a rhinoceros on a second-story building, and wound up killing a kid by crushing him as a rhino. He didn't mean to. Kieran's actually a pretty good person. He just circumstances. And then the last kid died, and a couple of the party members went down, but were able to be revived and not revived, but healed. And it was kind of a big division, big moment in the party. After this happened, they decided to take the kids' bodies and throw them into the ocean and kind of be rid of them, as the townspeople were very happy of what happened. The party then had a little bit of a couple sessions where it's very separated and people weren't talking to each other. It was kind of an awkward time. Uh, but they had things that they needed to do. So they moved on and made their way to the merfolk encampment outside of Valandrios. Were able to take down the evil that was in there, and there was actually a evil creature from another plane that was able to get banished. That I really wanted them to fight, but they wound up banishing it. So they banished that, got a couple things to take home, an apparatus, a makeshift vehicle, and a cloak of displacement, and made their way back to the king underwater. And the king provided some additional information about the Queen of Decay, and that the Valandrian navy is ever expanding, and they believe that Valandrios is trying to take over again, which didn't really sit well with the entire group. And after this, they decided to make their way back to Ethvald and attempt to help stop the Clockwork King, and see what's going on there. When they went back to the house, they wound up going down through the tunnels and were met by some golems, some sleeping darts that were shot at them, and they went into this room with a large tree and a chest in the middle of it. When they all entered the room filled with water, and they wound up switching their bodies. So Kieran was Ig, and so on and so forth throughout the party. They wound up finding out that the Clockwork King was at the power plant that kind of powers the entire island. They wound up meeting the Clockwork King at that power plant, killing his minions that were protecting him, and found out that he was working on a clockworked ancient dragon that he was going to use to attempt to stop. Well, this bad Clockwork King was going to try to use it for mischievous stuff, but the original Clockwork King was going to use it to protect Ethvald from any intruders, as Valandrios had come and threatened them that they wanted materials and they wanted things for them to help. They were able to switch bodies back and put Cantris, the actual Clockwork King, back into his body, and were able to convince the town members that Cantris was not bad, and that he had just been in a bad spot at the time, and he had switched bodies with the chest that was sentient. Town members didn't really believe the chest was sentient. Party knows it's sentient, but just a weird circumstance that there's a sentient chest that switched bodies with the most powerful creature in all of the island. So they wound up making their way after this towards Ethvald, and sorry, not towards Ethvald, towards Rango. And when they made it back to Rango, they met up with the tavern. They met up Actually, that's where we're at currently. They went back to Rango. They went into the city. They all went to sleep except for Sango and Kieran. Kieran and Sango had a little bit of a heart-to-heart moment, which is pretty juicy. And the rest of them went to bed and leveled up. And that's where we have left off for our current session. And you have to stop on Wednesday nights at twitch.tv/GopeeWan-Kenobi to watch the new sessions.